This is the last section on integumentary system and body membranes in Biology 160, Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. And today what we're going to talk about in this section is homeostatic imbalances of the skin. So in this portion of the lecture we've been talking about the skin as an organ system. We want to look at what happens when things go wrong. So we've talked about homeostasis. Hopefully you remember that word from our first lecture that we talked when we defined it and talked a little bit about it. But basically what homeostasis is a balance. So our body has to maintain some sort of balance in order to maintain the functions of living things. If anything goes wrong to bump it out of balance, then that's when problems can occur. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with the skin, and the thing about the skin is if you have a homeostatic imbalance, it's pretty easy to recognize that because your skin is exposed so that you can see it easily. And so if you have bumps or some sort of lesion or something like that, you're readily going to recognize that you have a problem. And we're not necessarily going to go over these things, but you might look these up or read a little bit that's in your book about these types of homeostatic imbalances. There's things like boils caused by infections, chickenpox, which is a virus that is going to cause homeostatic imbalances in the skin. Athlete's foot is a fungus, and then you have cold sores, which are caused by viruses. You have acne, where your pores get clogged. All of these things are going to cause homeostatic imbalances that you can see on the skin. The ones I want to talk about today are, first of all, burns. So burns can be quite dangerous, and burns occur when there's any sort of tissue damage of either the epidermis or the dermis layer. It can be caused by a lot of different things. Usually we think about fire, which would be heat, but you can also have electric burns, radiation, UV radiation burns, so sunburns can also be very dangerous, or it can be caused by chemicals. All of these things can cause burns on the skin. First, whenever your skin is burned, interestingly enough, the very first thing, the most dangerous thing after a burn is dehydration. And that might not be something that comes first to mind if someone's to ask you, what's the most dangerous part about getting burned? But that is because what happens is when your skin is burned, it's killing all your skin cells. It's also killing all of the pathogens, bacteria, and things on your skin as well. So for a short period of time, all those pathogens are dead, so they're not going to start infecting your body until they start returning to that area. So the most dangerous part, initially at least, is dehydration, because remember that one of the functions of our skin here is it's our barrier with the outside, and it's keeping our body, the water inside our body. So we're 70% water roughly, and so when we remove that outer layer of skin, all the fluids inside our body are going to leak out, and that's going to lead to electrolyte balance. It's going to lead to dehydration. And so someone that's been severely burned, that's the first thing you have to worry about is dehydration. Then after that, after maybe the next 24 hours, after the first 24 hours is after, then you're going to start worrying about infection and keeping that wound clean. The way you can tell how severe a burn is first of all, there's the first degree, second degree, third degree burns, which you've probably heard about before, and I'll mention those in just a second. But first of all, I want to talk about this thing that's called the rule of nines. And what's happening in the rule of nines is that you can split our body up into areas, and each of those areas makes up roughly 9%. So there's 11 areas, each of them making up about 9% of the body. So if you look at this figure here, first of all, we have our head region. So the front of your head would be 4%, roughly 4% of your body. The back of your head is about 4%. That equals a 9%. Same thing with each of your arms. So the front of your arm is about 4% of your body. The back of your arm is about 4%. So that's another 9% of your body. Each of the arms. Each leg, the front of your leg is about 9%. The back is going to be about 9%. So that makes up 18% here, 18% for the other leg. And then you have your trunk. The front of your body here is about 18% of your body, and the back is going to be about 18%. And then you have the perineum, which is about 1%. All of that adds up to 100% of your body. Understanding how much of the body has been burned is important in trying to return the fluids to the body. So depending on the percentage of the body that has burns, that's going to tell you how much fluid to return. Also going to tell you the severity of the burn. So a burn is considered severe and critical if over 25% of the body is burned. And so using this rule of 9s here, you can quickly add up and see how much of the body is burned. If it's over 25%, then that's dangerous. Or in the case of a third-degree burn, if only 10% of the body has third-degree burns, that's very dangerous. And then also, if you have third-degree burns on your hands or your face, then that's going to be very, very dangerous as well. Especially if you get burns around your face, that means that your respiratory tract could be burned as well, and if it starts to swell, that could cause you to suffocate. So there's a number of things that can happen with burns. Let's talk briefly about first degree, second degree, and third degree burns. So first degree burn, this is the least of burns. And so you're probably familiar with first degree burns. This is if you go out in the sun, get a sunburn, that's usually going to be a first degree burn. We're thinking about layers of the skin. A first degree burn just means that the epidermis has been burned. So just your upper layer of skin. So first degree burns aren't necessarily dangerous. They hurt, but you haven't removed any of those important layers of your skin, so not as dangerous as others. The second degree burn, now you've moved through the epidermis and you've begun to burn the upper layers of the dermal region as well. So second degree burn is recognized by blisters on the skin. And blisters are interesting because what's happening with blisters is blisters are formed between that layer of epidermis and dermis. So remember, we had this thin layer of epidermis sitting on a larger layer of dermis. It looks something like this. So in this area between this epidermis and dermis, this is usually connected together. But in the case of burn and other times when you get blisters, this is the same with the blister. Just if you're rubbing your skin, doing work outside, and you get a blister, these two layers of skin are starting to separate, and you get this fluid filled. Fluid starts to fill that space, and that's what is known as a blister. So in a blister, you have the epidermis over the top, and then you have this fluid filled center, and then you have the dermal layer underneath, and that blister is forming between those two layers. And if it pops, basically that means the epidermis is coming off. So in a second degree burn, you've gone through the epidermis down to the dermis, and you've started to form this blister. And this is going to be very painful, again, because remember in the dermal layer, that's where your nerve endings are, and so you're going to really feel this pain. The third degree burn, though, is the most dangerous type of burn. And in this case, in a third degree burn, you have gone and burned the epidermis and all of the dermis away. So you've basically burned your skin totally away. And so this is very dangerous because now your whole protective layer is gone. Fluids can all leak out. Pathogens can get in, and your protective barrier is gone. Notice also in a third degree burn, it's not necessarily readily going to heal itself. And what I mean by that, so in a first degree burn, you're burning the epidermis, but those stem cells are still there, and your dermal layer is still all intact, and so it can regenerate very easily. Second degree burn, now you've burned all the epidermis, but because the dermis is still intact and you haven't burned away this dermal layer, it can also regenerate. But in the 3rd degree burn, you've burned away all your skin, so it's not going to regenerate very easily. It has to come from the sides of the burn. You're going to have skin trying to grow over the top, and so you're going to end up with a lot of scar tissue and things like that. Or you're going to have to take skin grafts and take skin from other areas of the body, put it over this burn in order to replace that skin that has been lost, and it can grow back and replace itself. So in the 3rd degree burn, you've burned all of your skin basically off. And another interesting thing about a 3rd degree burn is that it's not going to hurt as badly. And the reason is, remember again, the dermal layer has all the nerve endings, and so if you burn all those nerve endings away, you're not going to feel any pain. There may be pain along the edges of the burn where it's not burned clear through, but where the 3rd degree burn is you're not going to have any pain. And it's usually white or black colored. And there you go. So that's talking about burns and how dangerous they are and how they cause homeostatic imbalances in the body. The other thing we want to talk about briefly here is skin cancer. Whenever we talk about cancer, I think this is kind of a scary topic, and cancer can be very scary, but cancer comes in a lot of different types, different forms. In skin cancer, we're going to look at a few different types here. But before we talk about that, there's a couple words that I want to mention to you when we talk about cancer. One is benign and one is malignant. Benign, if you had a choice between type of cancer to have, benign or malignant, you'd want to choose benign, because benign means it's not going to spread. It's in a certain area, it's growing, but the speed of that growth depends. Usually it's growing very slowly, it's not spreading through the body. Malignant cancer, on the other hand, this is very dangerous, and there's a word we call metastasis, and metastasis means the movement of cells around the body, in particular cancer cells. So in metastasis, you may have cancer forming in the skin, but it's not going to stay in the skin. It's going to hitch a ride either in the blood vessels or the lymph vessels, and it can move to other parts of the body and cause cancer there. So you may have cancer of the liver that is actually skin cancer that has moved to the liver and starts growing there. You may have cancer in the brain or the breast that comes from somewhere else, and vice versa. And so the way that you treat that cancer is going to depend on where that cancer came from. And so that's important as they diagnose these things. Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer, interestingly enough, and often caused by UV radiation. So the way cancer happens is it's caused by mutations in your DNA. So we talked about DNA a little bit when we talked about organic molecules, but fundamentally, mutations or changes in your DNA sequence is going to cause cancer. So when you're going out into the sun, what's actually happening is that sun comes down and hits your skin. As that radiation hits your skin, that radiation is going inside the skin cell. Here's our skin cell. Here's our nucleus here. It's going inside the skin cell, inside your nucleus, and causing changes in your DNA. So that's an interesting thing to think about. And so as those changes happen in the DNA, that can trigger this cell to become cancerous, which means that basically it's not going to do the job that it's supposed to do. It's not going to act like a skin cell. It's going to just grow uncontrollably, go through mitosis, produce all these other cells that don't do what they're supposed to, and so you have a lot of problems here. One of the things I think that makes cancer so scary is that in this case it's not a foreign body like a bacteria or a virus that's attacking your body. It's your own cells that are turning against you, and they're not really hurting and they're not really destroying cells in your body, but their problem comes because they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and so they're taking the resources away from the other parts of your body, and they're not functioning, and so they can lead to the shutdown of your body. So types of skin cancer. We have basal cell carcinoma. So we have carcinoma and we have melanoma. And the type is dependent on what cells are becoming cancerous. So in this case, basal cell. So we talked about the basali layer, stratum basali layer in the epidermis, and this is where these cells rise from. Remember, these are the stem cells that give rise to all the cells in the epidermal layer. So if these cells become cancerous, they're no longer producing new skin cells, they're producing cancer cells. And this would be something often called a sunspot. It's not very malignant, but it is the most common type. And because it's not malignant, and here's a picture, if you can go in there and basically cut this out, usually that's going to heal and it's not really going to cause any problems. But it's caused by these stratum basali cells becoming cancerous. Okay, the next type is squamous cell carcinoma. Remember, we talked about squamous. Squamous it means a flattened cell. This is a type of carcinoma. This type of skin cancer can metastasize and move throughout the body. But if you get in here early and remove it, there's a good chance that it can heal. This is often caused by the sun, as well as the basal cell carcinoma that we just saw. Those are caused by sun, which is why they're called sunspots. This one comes from the stratum spinosum. So that was one of the upper layers above the stratum basali in the skin, and in this case, the skin cells haven't yet died. So the epidermal cells that are dead can't become cancerous. Once a cell is dead, it's not going to become cancerous. So it's only going to happen, these cancers are only going to be caused in those layers of the epidermis that are still living cells. Then there's a third type, the most dangerous type of skin cancer, is this malignant melanoma. So melanoma, so that word looks a lot like a melanocyte, and that's where this type of cancer comes from. So remember, the melanocytes are cells in your skin that give the skin the pigment. And so these melanocytes are becoming cancerous, and so these cancers look like moles. So often a mole, you may have a mole that is starting to look abnormal. That could be malignant melanoma. So they're going to be very dark, very kind of ugly looking spots on the skin. These are very dangerous because they metastasize and they move around the body. Once it starts moving around the body, that's very dangerous, and you're going to get cancer all these different places. It becomes very hard to fight. And so melanoma is quite deadly. This is the type of skin cancer that people usually die from when they get it. The way that you can tell, so I mentioned that it looks a lot like a mole. So you can scan your body, and using something called the ABCD rule, you can decide if a mole is dangerous or not, and if you need to do something about a spot that you may have on the skin. And so let's talk a little bit about the ABCD rule. So here's the ABCD rule. So as you look at the different moles on your body, and this is a good exercise to do every so often, you can use these rules here to decide if it may be cancerous or not. The first one is asymmetry. So if the mole doesn't match, if it's not symmetrical in its pigmentation, it may be cancerous. The B stands for border irregularity. So normal moles are going to be nice and smooth, kind of round on their edges, but if you start to get all these an irregular border, so notice here on this picture, you've got all these irregularities in this border, it may be cancerous. Third, color. So if the pigmented area of the moles, if it's all different colors, if it's a uniform color, probably okay. If you have all these different colors, dark and light in your mole, then that may be cancerous as well. And then finally, diameter. If it's getting bigger than 6 millimeters, then it may be cancerous. If it's growing, it may be cancerous. So as you look at your moles, you can decide whether they look cancerous or not. And if you think they may be cancerous, then take it in, have a doctor look at it, and they can tell if it's cancerous. If you can remove it, and then catch it before it becomes cancerous, and then that's the best way to stop from getting these types of skin cancer, and especially the dangerous ones. Malignant melanoma. So that's the homeostatic imbalances of the skin. That's all we have for this portion of our lecture, and so in the next lecture we're going to be moving into the skeletal system. Remember, if you have any questions, send me an email and let me know how I can help you out.